Welcome to the Evening Review. My name is Rinaani. Today we are featuring the Basic Income Grant Coalition, where we'll be expanding on why the need for a basic grant to be paid. But before we go into that interview, please have a look at today's newspaper. Welcome to the Evening Review.
Thank you, Ahone. Thanks for inviting me.
We have heard talks of a basic income grant. Your coalition is advocating for such a grant to be paid. Should government take your advice, what would this income grant entail, and to whom would it be paid out, and all of those granular details?
Yes, the basic income grant would definitely be a social protection program by the government, paid on a regular basis to the citizens of Namibia. In our case, we are advocating for the basic income grant to be paid to Namibians aged 19 to 59, and we asking for 500 to be paid monthly to that age group. That's because they haven't got any social protection covering them at all. So basic income grant is a grant that's paid monthly, regularly, which means on a monthly basis. It's permanent. It's not just like a once-off thing. It has to be a permanent thing, and it shouldn't be means tested, meaning that making people jump through various hoops to prove that they are, worthy of the grant. So yes, the government should definitely take basic income grant seriously. They should take our advice to implement basic income grant. That's because Namibia is a highly unequal country. It's one of the most unequal countries in the world, and 2/3 of the Namibian people live below the poverty line. And basic income grant has been proven by the Oshivero basic income grant pilot project that was conducted during 2008 and 2009. That has proven that basic income grant is the fastest and most cost-efficient way of reducing inequality and poverty. And without really resolving the inequality and poverty issues, there is never going to be economic prosperity in Namibia, because getting rid of those social ills is the best way that you could develop the country economically.
When you speak of this income grant, would one now need to pay consideration to, for example, whether one is employed, the economic class that you fall in versus now previously advantaged versus previously disadvantaged, and so forth? Where does this now come to fit in?
Okay, the reason why the coalition feels that the basic income grant shouldn't be means tested is because once you set up an administrative system for something like that, that's when you start excluding certain people already, people who are already from disadvantaged backgrounds, who are not able to access, services, or don't have the correct papers in order to apply for a basic income grant. So you're actually deterring those people from applying. So the people who are intended, the most vulnerable people who are intended for the grant will be excluded. They would, definitely struggle to apply. And one of the reasons why we also say that it shouldn't be means tested is because setting up an administrative system like that and trying to find out who's worthy of receiving basic income grant is very costly. The government will end up spending more money on administratively trying to figure out who should get it and who shouldn't get it. And then at the end of the day, there's no money left to be given to the people that really need it. And Namibia's employment environment is very precarious. There is no permanent employment most of the time. You get a job, 1 week you work here and the other week you don't have a job. It's just like that, and a lot of Namibians, the majority of the Namibians are employed in the informal sector, and you never know whether you'll have an income tomorrow or not. It depends on how your customers support you, and when it's economic times, when it's difficult economic times, and then you don't have customers and you don't have an income, so you cannot really, in that way, in such a precarious work environment, figure out who should be getting basic income grant. It will never work. And people having to go to the office, whichever office will be responsible for basic income grant, you would have to go there 1 week, you go and report yourself, oh no, I don't have a job now this week. And then they take you off the basic income grant. And next week, oh, now I got a job here for 1 week, and then you have to go back to the office again and say, now I'm back on my job. It's just going to create a lot of chaos, and it's going to leave a lot of doors open for corruption as well. It should be done in the same way as the old age pension, where no, background check is done on whether you are a millionaire or you earn what. You're guaranteed your pension once you turn 60, and that also works really well in Namibia, and that has worked reduced a lot of hunger in Namibia.
The concept of of administering it universally has been criticized before. One looks at the example also of Brazil, where there are cited notable criticisms of rolling this thing out universally. What do you say to such criticism?
Do you mean that people criticize it
on the basis that you give it out universally without, because the idea, one would assume that the idea is that that it goes to those that need it the most, and you've touched on that. But again, the fact that you have to administer it, now give it to somebody that is high, that is well off, and to the other person that needs it the most has gained some criticism.
That is really not a big issue at all. The most important thing that we are trying to do here is to make sure you don't exclude the people who really need it the most. What you can do then is give it to everybody, as you said, whether they earn over $1 million or whatever. And what you can do then is adjust that specific person's tax code, so that you recap that money that you gave them. It's not going to cost anybody any extra money. It's not going to cost that person any extra money at all. So you do it in such a way that the people who earn a lot of money, they then...
higher tax bracket, for example.
Exactly. Their tax code can be adjusted in order to make sure that, that money is recapped and comes back to the government. And the Namibian government is really good at adjusting taxes. It's something they do periodically, so it doesn't cost anything. It's not an effort. It's something that can be done very easily and very quickly.
As part of the Harambee Prosperity Plan, there was a food bank that was rolled out, and now with the now that we're in the second phase of the plan, government has looked at moving from the food bank into a transitional basic income grant. Do you think, what do you make of this, of the development, and was the food, what were your thoughts on the food bank?
First of all, nobody is 100% sure at the moment what is happening with the food bank. who's receiving it, where it's been given, how many people are receiving it, what the impact is. The most important thing, what the impact of Harambee was on the vulnerable people of our country. Is there anybody really who can come out and say, oh, Harambee, I have benefited this from Harambee, this is how Harambee has changed my life? If there is somebody out there, we're waiting to hear from that person. Now the problem is that the plan is to convert the food bank, and apparently there's also a special feeding program for the most marginalized people in Namibia, which I wasn't aware of. Convert those into a monthly grant, which will be a basic income grant, which will be a means testing thing. And then the basic income grant will only be given to the people who were previously receiving the food bank.
Yes, yes.
Now, we don't know what's happening with the food bank, as the president himself, President Geingob, mentioned at the launch of the Harambee Prosperity Plan 2. He said that we had the food bank. What does we had mean? That's now really confusing. Is it still there? Is it not there? Who's receiving it? How many people are receiving it? So, basing the basic income grant on the food bank, which we don't know about what's happening with it, where it is, how it has improved people's lives, whether it has worked. In my opinion, I don't think the food bank has worked at all in reducing poverty. So it's going to be a real big problem saying that you're going to base the basic income grant or on the food bank on something that hasn't worked at all. That's not going to work, and I don't think there's a clear plan on how that's going to be done at all. And I know one of the things that were mentioned in the plan was that there's a lot of people in Namibia who don't have documentation. They don't have IDs, they don't have birth certificates, that kind of thing. And for them, in order to roll out the basic income grant, they would want everybody in Namibia to have an ID card or a birth certificate, what would be needed to apply. That's something. What time frame? How's that going to happen? Is that something that was already supposed to be done throughout, consistently? That hasn't been done. So there's quite a lot of people who don't have those documents. How are they going to work around that? It's not very clear at all. So at the end of the day, it's just so vague, the whole idea of converting the food bank into basic income grant. It's vague. I don't think it's going to work because the food bank hasn't worked at all. So that just makes me feel that the plan wasn't really properly thought out. If somebody is really serious about making the basic income grant a reality in Namibia, the only way to go is not to make it means tested, making people jump through different loops and stuff like that. If you're really serious about it, just do it. It's very simple. The Basic Income Grant Coalition has done studies. We know how to do it. If people needed to find out how to implement the whole thing, it's very easy. It's not even expensive. They can just get in touch with the coalition and we can work on it together.
Resources were committed to the food bank. If one looks now at the start of the Harambee Prosperity Plan, food bank was announced, the resources went into it, people unaccounted for now, or one probably cannot put a figure to it. How best do you think government could have spent those resources?
Those resources could have been spent on a regular, monthly payment, like the basic income grant. I know that, or it's been alleged that the food that was distributed during the food bank program, the food were being purchased from ShopRite, allegedly.
Now, one of the retailers.
Yeah, one of the South African retailers, not even a Namibian retailer. So now, the problem is, you give people mealie meal, for example, or whatever package that you give, and then that person didn't really need a bag of mealie meal. They needed cash, so they can go and buy pads, for example. There's lots of girls who stay home because they don't have pads, or they needed to take a taxi somewhere, transport to school. You know, girls get raped along the way to school. Many other things, pay for school fees, pay for the hostel fees, all these things that people need to do, is that if you give them cash instead of food, that sometimes they don't need at that specific moment, of course. With the cash, then you can empower those people to do what they needed to do the most with the money, without you having to decide for them, like, now, okay, now this is what you need. You just need a bag of Millie Meal. You know, maybe it's not what that person needed. So people, there has been experience of people giving away some of that food, or even selling it further on. Because then at that moment, maybe they needed the cash to do something else with it. They didn't need the Millie Meal. So giving people cash grants is much more effective than giving people food, you know, through the food bank. In that way, you know exactly what money you spent, where the money is gone, you know, and then there's also many ways through tax system that you can recap that money. You know, the government will definitely get the money back in revenues, because when people have money to spend, you know, it stimulates the economy in that way as well. There's money that's circulating in the economy, and in that way that gives in more revenues to the government, actually.
You mentioned the issue of social safety nets, people being aged between 19 and 59 not benefiting from any of the programs that government has rolled out. But if one considers what is paid out to orphans, what is paid out to the disabled, obviously the elderly, should the efforts of government not be noted?
Yes, definitely should be noted. But one thing that I can say is that, for example, the child grant. The government has got a backlog of, I don't know, 6,000 applications, I believe it is, and they have lately not been taking any new applications anymore. So there are gaps everywhere. I don't know if you remember, there was this girl, a disabled girl, in Marua Mall, that was begging for money, and when the government found out, thankfully, she started receiving her disability grant. But that girl obviously felt that probably that's not enough. You can imagine, like, lots of people in Namibia, we're talking about close to half of the population is unemployed. So if that one person gets an income, everybody's going to depend on that small little income that person gets, because the rest of the household is not working. This girl decided she was going to go back to the streets, even though she was receiving the disability grant. And she was out there begging. She's still out there begging. Obviously, she feels that, you know, it's not enough. Namibia is a very, very expensive country. For example, Windhoek is about 34% more expensive than Cape Town. That's because we import most of our things, of our basic food. And that's what makes Namibia so expensive. So saying somebody should, like the child grant is 250, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
That's per month. You have 2-3 children, the parent is not working. You know, how much money are they gonna live on? Are they gonna have to live on? For example, a gambashu is already 1,400 to rent, unless you want to go and, you know, illegally occupy some spot there and build yourself a gambashu. That's rent already, you know, 1,400. And most Namibian people, between 70 and 80%, most people in Namibia receive less than 1,400. So what money do you have left? You know, obviously, yes, we are thankful that the government has got some of these social protection mechanisms in place. But we need more to make sure that the people's, you know, standard of living is brought to a level where it's humane. So, you know, having a universal child grant is also one of the things that we really feel that is important, to make sure that every child is covered. We don't want this thing of, no, now we're not taking applications, now the child grant is closed, this and that and this and that. We should try and make sure that everybody is covered properly, not just with a little bit of something, while the politicians pay themselves. For example, MPs get 70,000 per month. You're expecting somebody to live on 250 per month. I mean, how fair is that? Are they less human than you are? Or what do you think that you can get 70,000 and transport allowance and furniture allowance and housing allowance and entertainment allowance, all that, you live nice and lavishly, but you expect somebody to live on 250 per month? You know, how fair is that? You know, who really is contributing to the inequality in Namibia is, of course, our ruling elite.
And then, to close off, how does one go about funding this basic income grant if one also has to pay attention to government's precarious finances?
There's many ways that the government can fund the basic income grant. For example, they can make sure that the mining and the fishing industry pays, you know, its fair share of taxes. And with the fair share of taxes being paid to government, the government can use some of that money to finance the basic income grant program with. Say, for example, Canada, no, sorry, not Canada, Alaska, I mean. I keep saying Canada, I don't know why. Yeah, the state of Alaska. They take their oil dividends money and invest that into stocks, and the profits from the stocks, that's what they give to their people as some sort of a basic income grant. That's the closest model to basic income grant. So every person in Alaska receives, you know, a monthly grant from the oil dividends. That's something that Namibia has always been advised as well to follow, because that's the best way that you can, in a very quick way and most efficient way, make sure that you eradicate poverty. And some of the other ideas are also that the government can use the SACU income, you know, because most of that money is, of course, you know, from the taxes that people pay on alcohol, this import and cigarettes and stuff like that. So some of that money can be captured to finance a basic income grant with. And also the taxes. You know, well, the thing is that the government will get this money back in taxes. Once you give people money, they have a lot of money to spend, and there will be money circulating in the economy, and that actually boosts our economy and boosts the government's revenues. And in that money, the way that the money actually comes back to government. Another way that I can think of is, sorry about that.
No, don't take your time.
Did I give 3 examples?
You raised the taxing. You used the SACU revenue pool, and then you said taxing the fishing and mining industry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Another example that I can give is that I think the government should try to cut down on wastage, because there's a lot of money being wasted everywhere in Namibia. You know, dubious tenders, this and that, and lots of corruption going on. You know, that diverts money away from social programs such as the basic income grant. So once, you know, the government properly manages the state's money, there will be definitely enough to finance the basic income grant with.
Thank you very much for joining us on Evening Review.
Thank you very much, Ohone.
Thank you for tuning in. Please do stay tuned for the weather. Good night.